Yeah, I think that if you don't invite hope into the room or the conversation, then it won't have a presence, and we really do need it, and we especially need it in a time like this where people are feeling so uncertain about the future.
All right, welcome to another show of Searching for Hope. My name is Paul Peters. Looking forward to taking you on a journey today. Today our guest is Jason Russell. Jason Russell is one of the co-founders of Invisible Children. He names himself as a dream evangelist with his new company, Broomstick Engine. My understanding is Jason is a creative. He loves dreaming, loves telling story, and we're really excited to have him on our show today. Thanks for joining us, Jason.
Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for having me.
Cool. So the first question I've continually asked people as they've come on, and this is just maybe to get a little bit of a context of who Jason is. What is it that makes you come alive? Like what in life brings you life, brings you joy? What makes you come alive?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most clear answer would be stories, like different stories, whether that be in books or movies or individuals I meet and hear their story. That's what makes me come alive. And I'm very much like an extrovert, so I get energy from other people's, presence. And so this has been a more difficult time, just, being alone with my family, but, essentially being alone every day, day after day, Groundhog Day. Yeah.
It's driving you crazy. My wife and I were talking about that. We have two kids, a 2.5-year-old and then a 7-week-old. It's driving us crazy. We love them, but wow, being stuck in our house.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, and it brings out different parts of your personality and challenges you in ways that you're not used to. So it's a good thing.
Yeah, there's some good learning that can come out of it. Yeah, I mean, so as a show, like I've said before, our journey is towards this search for hope, this pursuit of hope. And this first season, if you want to call it, we're very new to this whole YouTube scene. We're totally new to making video. I'm totally new to being on camera. I would prefer to be behind a camera or even the one directing a camera. So this is very new to me. But part of your story that I really connected to, especially early on, I think I had heard of Invisible Children back when I was in high school. I graduated in 2005. So I'd heard of it a little bit. In 2007, I went to the Democratic Republic of Congo and fell in love with the people, the place. And in some ways, I think my heart still is a little bit there in the Congo. And when in 2012, when your Coney 2012 video came out, I was incredibly inspired by the video. And then, just like you've talked about in many other spaces, that journey of that first 12 hours of excitement to, oh no, to what it became. And so I empathized with maybe your heart in all of that. And at least I assumed. I made a lot of assumptions. I don't know you. You don't really know me. I know you through socials. That's about it. Instagram. And so I'm curious, what was your heart when you your journey, your dream as you were a part of founding this Invisible Children, and what was the impact or what was your hope in that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So initially we were we were actually committed to making the documentary about South Sudan because at the time there was a genocide taking place in Darfur and then other parts throughout South Sudan. And I just couldn't believe that, millions of people were dying and it wasn't getting the attention that I thought it deserved in terms of like other, Holocausts or tragedies that have happened throughout history. So our goal was to actually go to South Sudan, and South Sudan is right above northern Uganda. And we went to northern Uganda to interview South Sudanese and ended up seeing these children fleeing from another conflict, from a guy named Joseph Kony and the Lord's Resistance Army. And when we were there in 2003, there truly wasn't other journalists there that we could see. We spent 2 months there, and because the need was so great and because the UN at the time called it the largest, like most horrific humanitarian crisis in the world. We felt the obligation to tell that story the best that we could, but we were 23, 21, and 19. And so we had never made a documentary. And, you know, we came back and thought that would be our contribution, to just like tell the story. But once we showed it to people, everyone's reaction was the same. What can we do? What can we do to help? And out of that question came the nonprofit Invisible Children. And we went back over and spent a lot of time figuring out what would create the biggest impact. And the two things we mainly focused on were education and job creation, and then helping end the conflict through peace talks or some kind of intervention, which took years and years to kind of discover what would be the best, most peaceful way of trying to bring the conflict to an end. So,
wow,
kind of a long answer.
Sure. I mean, that's an overwhelming journey, maybe, to get like, that's a lot. I mean, I think of, for me, again, not to pivot too much here, but when thinking of the Congo and my experience there, in some ways it felt so overwhelming that I didn't even know what to do, that I almost did nothing. I built relationship and I cared for people, and I still have great relationships. And there's a lot of people in the Congo that I would consider family, but I think I was very overwhelmed by a feeling of, is there anything I can do that would ever make a difference?
Yeah.
I'm curious, what was your hope in that season? What was the hope for those, was it 12 years that you were kind of full on with Invisible Children?
Yeah, it was. Mm-hmm.
What
so
was
it's pretty much right after college. And then essentially it was the first job I ever had.
Your own boss, wow.
Yeah. And then so that went all the way to the end of 2014. So
Wow.
We've been doing Broomstick Engine since then. So the past 6 years. Yeah.
So in that season, what was the hope? Like, it sounds like the hope was to bring peace and to.
Yeah. So, I mean, all the other things, yeah. You can bring education, like we were really focused on schools, secondary schools, scholarships, mentorship. And these were all programs that were birthed out of, you know, the Acholi people and Northern Uganda. They knew what they needed. We were just there to kind of support that and help rebuild 11 schools and put over 1,000 kids through secondary school. And our hope really was just to tell the story. You know what I mean? Like, our job as the filmmakers of Invisible Children, our job was to tell the story to the best that we could. And, you know, Coney 2012 was the 11th or 12th movie we had made. So it wasn't like, it wasn't our first story. We had made many bracelet movies and other campaigns and had raised a ton of money before this, but the culmination was really in 2012 to say, let's make a movie for the internet. Because our mindset was that most people, including ourselves, don't go home and put a documentary on about child soldiers. You know, it's too depressing. Yeah.
It's heavy.
So we were like, we have to get this into like a kind of a captive audience. Like, who is a captive audience? And clearly kids have to go to school by law. So we felt like going after high schools and colleges would give us a window of 30 to 60 minutes to do an assembly and really shatter their perspective of what justice looks like in the world and how they can be a part of like the first generation of bringing global justice to fruition. And that's really what Joseph Kony represented when he was the first indicted by the International Criminal Court. It said to the world, these crimes are so horrific against women and children that we as the world need to say, this has to stop. And of course, there's a lot of controversy around that because you're talking about international justice and you're talking about like nations coming together to agree upon crimes and war crimes. But yeah, our hope was really just we really believed that peace was possible, and we believed that peace talks and bringing the Ugandan government and the rebel group together to come to some kind of handshake would be a beautiful way for the story to end, but it didn't turn out that way. So yeah, our hope was just to tell the story well, and then like we really believed that there were people in the world, institutions, governments, experts, that would usher in peace for the people affected by this war. And it's not just northern Uganda, you know, it's in the Congo, it's South Sudan, so it's a multi region conflict. And it ended up that we kept having to pass a bill through Congress, or you know, talk to different like military forces ourselves to see what the actual plan was. Because when you're dealing with a conflict in which people on the totem pole of hierarchy of life, when they don't matter politically, socially, or economically, they won't get the attention that they deserve. And that runs throughout all history, that runs through all like, you know, people's groups. And that our hope was to flip it upside down and say, can this community that lives on less than $1 a day, you know, get justice and get attention that they deserve, because their children have been taken from them, anywhere between 30 to 80,000 children kidnapped. So like we were just thinking, if that was even like a dozen kids in America, it would make international news. And here it's been going on for almost 30 years. And I guess it's just like same old Africa story, maybe, that people hear.
Well, that's the, I mean, even again, back to Congo, I mean, in that Central African region, I mean, I think it's tens of millions of people that have died over the last 30 years. And it sometimes feels like nobody cares.
Yeah, right.
Clearly there are people that care, people who cared so much that they, I mean, dedicated their life in many ways to it.
Yeah.
Which is maybe where my next question, and maybe hopefully this doesn't feel too personal, but my curiosity, and maybe where I started to go after it for the first little while after that video was released, I had lots of people asking me my opinion. Well, I'd been to Congo, so you know about the LRA. What do you think of this video? What do you think? All they wanted to know was an opinion on this video, because that's all people, somehow people just wanted to talk a bit about the video instead of actually, we still couldn't deal with the conflict, which I found quite frustrating. But it came to a point where it was hard to watch. Thinking of myself, I could imagine your dreams and maybe even your intent in it. And I'm curious what it felt like to have all of that just crushed or stripped. Maybe I'm assuming a feeling here. So if that isn't the truth, I apologize. But what was it like then to have this dream? I mean, at that point, then it would have been 12 years. If you went 2 more years after 2012, almost in some ways, I know your work prior might not have been implied, but in some ways, everyone just ripped everything to shreds, and not everyone, but that's what the news looked like. And that's what the conversation became. And I'm curious what it felt like, and where did you refine hope in that? Like, where did you refine, like, cause you've got a new company, you've taken your family around the world, like there's clearly still dream and passion and vision. But when I think of what you had to go through for those 2 years, or that year, or the 6 months, whatever it might have been, and I wasn't there. Well, where did you find hope in that? Like, with everything feeling like it was stripped away. Does that make sense? Fair to ask?
Yeah, I think that it's been a really long process. Like the first few days of Kony 2012 were really exciting. It was beyond our wildest dreams, and to kind of remind people, to put it in perspective, like it was and still is the most viral movie of all time. And that means it passed 120 million views within a week. And that meant that like 60% of the global tweets on Twitter around the world were about Kony 2012, were about Uganda, were about invisible children. And so that kind of pressure is very intoxicating and exciting. And of course, my ego was like, this is what we've dreamt of, like to have a movie get this much attention. And then I think just by the nature of the internet, or the nature of like humanity, when anything gets like that big, it's going to have a wave of backlash. It's going to have, opinions and have it be really controversial. And so I think that the most frustrating part was just not being able to get ahead of the narrative and not be able to like communicate the truth. And so much of the controversy or the misconceptions were based on people's opinions. And so I think that was really heartbreaking for us as an organization to not be able to like share with the millions of people who might be confused about like the truth about our work and what we do. And then but like even then, so like even when I had my breakdown and then I took time off and came back, the thing is, our goal for Kony 2012 was always to make Kony famous, and we felt like we did that to the best of our ability. We actually did it. And then the follow-up was like, okay, now the world at large, let's all work together on making sure that Joseph Kony is removed from the battlefield. The feeling was still exciting because I was coming back to work and I was coming back to the people I loved and the community that I loved. And I don't think that the hope faded until we had to like fire ourselves and get a different job and have what we thought was going to be the end of Invisible Children. We never imagined it would be that way. And I think that's when the hopelessness kind of set in, that the story wouldn't end the way we wanted it to. And so, yeah, in times like that, and it's been kind of years of feeling that way of just like, I know people cared about this issue, but why has it not been resolved yet? And so, yeah, I mean, I cling to hope because the alternative of not clinging to hope is, in my opinion, a life that's more miserable. So I think that if you don't invite hope into the room or the conversation, then it won't have a presence, and we really do need it. And we especially need it in a time like this where people are feeling so uncertain about the future.
Well, thanks for sharing, Jason. Yeah, I have so many questions, not for here, but I have so many questions, and I think there's so much we could learn from even the strength that you've come out of that with. So I appreciate that. But that maybe transitions quite well into, I'd love to talk a little bit about your journey around the world with your family. You took this journey around the world. I think you wrote a book. Was it your wife and your wife that wrote a book, A Little Radical,
Yep.
ABCs to Activism, I think is what it's called. And in some ways, you wanted to take your family around the world to experience, I'm going to paraphrase, you don't use the word hope maybe as directly, but in some ways experience the power of the people around the world and the change that people are making and how we can be a part of that change and how we can step into that change. I'd be very curious in a time like this where I think in some ways this is maybe the first time in history where the whole world has to band together and we're fighting against the same thing. We have to come together. Like there's no way around this. I'm curious where in your travel and places you've been and people you might have met, what kind of hope did you experience or see from some of the people or organizations or cultures that you connected with? Like, are there places that you remember, man, like that was a place that just struck me and just hit me in the heart. Like that was powerful to be there.
There's so many, so I'll just try to think of, I mean, the one that really comes to my mind is we had the opportunity to go to the Rwandan genocide memorial, and the people that are giving the tours, the ones who walk you around and explain the museum, are victims of the genocide. So our leader, his entire family had been murdered when he was 5, and he was somehow hidden in a family that would allow, like they brought him in to pretend like he was one of their kids. And just like seeing that he is, now 30, and a grown up and have no parents, no family, nobody at all, and yet still like choose to come to a genocide memorial every day to tell the story, shows me that he has hope that this can't happen again, and that he's living testimony of the pain and suffering that one goes through. And I think that watching Rwandans each day choose unity over division, and once a week they all come out and have a community like cleaning of the neighborhood, and it's really just like, to prevent anything that can divide them. And I think that's what, a silver lining to what's happening now is, like you said, we have to work together. We have to come together. We have to know that it will get better, and believe that and cling to that. So yeah, Rwanda was a really good one, I think, in terms of showing that we are survivors at our core.
Mm.
And even when dark things happen, and violent things happen, and scary things happen, that we will survive.
Maybe two wrap-up questions. I mean,
Yeah.
I could talk all afternoon about things that you've learned, but I'm asking everyone the same question: is if you could choose how maybe your kids or the people around you remember Jason, what do you want people to think of when they think of Jason? Like, what do you want them to remember about Jason?
Yeah. Hopefully that I was present, and that I maybe helped inspire them in some way to become who they truly are and pursue the dreams that they have. And yeah, I hope they just say that I was kind, and that I cared.
Uh, I'm going to say there's three questions because you bring up
Okay.
dreams.
No
You
problem.
talk about dreams often, or at least, again, you call yourself a dream evangelist. What advice would you give someone who's got a dream that maybe feels too big or scary? How was it that you took a dream and made it a reality? What advice would you give someone to say, step out and realize that dream, or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really just it is all about staying close to your curiosity, and like what makes you, like you said, come alive, and pursuing that. And you know, I think, I mean, even for me, like I have my own future dreams that I'm still like wanting to make happen, but because they seem so daunting and overwhelming, I feel like even chipping away at them isn't gonna happen. So I think just taking it like, one step at a time, and like releasing yourself from that pressure of it having to be, you know, everything, and win all the awards or get all the views. I think just, yeah, pushing into the curiosity that you have, and then working each day towards that goal. And like, I think it always helps to have friends or family, someone who's like with you on that journey, because it feels less alone.
Hmm. That's it. It's kind of funny that you say that, because in some ways, I mean, this little project that we're stepping out into was an idea 9 days ago, was just an idea that happened because of the situation we're in as a world. And I mean, I've been someone who's always loved hearing people's stories, helping people tell stories, creating space for people to tell story. Um, I've never had the courage to step out and do something that I put out for really in a real way like this. And so in some ways, this is us stepping out and saying, well, we're going to just try it. Like, if 10 people watch it, cool.
Yeah.
I just want to be happy with the story that we're telling, and making sure that we make whoever we have with us feel comfortable and confident in the story that they have to share. And so anyways,
Well, I think it's great that you're doing that.
but no, thanks. It's fun. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a crazy, wild ride for 9 days already, but loving it. My last question, maybe bring it back to hope. What advice do you have for finding hope in seasons when maybe everything around you feels hopeless? That's a big question, and maybe not everything around us seems hopeless, but there's a lot of uncertainty. And depending where you're living right now, that uncertainty is greater or less. But is there a simple piece of advice you might give someone to find hope when it just feels crushing around you?
Yeah. I think that I'll just speak for myself. I mean, I've had, seasons of depression and feeling like, worthless, or like I'm not going to achieve the next, goal or succeed again. And I think that for me, that this season of being home with the family and just, I find comfort in knowing that we're all in it together, that we're all experiencing similar emotions and anxiety, and that there's something very healing and warm and comforting knowing that this is a universal emotional collective bringing together. And so that's really how I see it, despite like the numbers of the virus and the death and the sickness and the pain that is there and that is with us, but it's also the thing that's getting us to create and clap together and sing together and kind of see one another not as just nations with these labels and identities, but like as these crazy, fragile creatures that have come from the earth and are made of stardust. And, I've been zooming out a lot and thinking about how, like, to a star in the sky, the lifespan of a human being is like a day. It's just like alive and dead, just one day. And, because these stars are billions of years old. So to me, it's like the Mary Oliver quote about what are you going to do with your one wild, dangerous life? Like, I mean, that's paraphrasing, but she's just like, you have one life. So, and, to a star, it's just a day. So what are you going to do with today? What are you going to do with the time you have? And if that's bringing hope to anyone through a YouTube, interview, great. That's a day worth living.
Well, thanks a lot, Jason. I just appreciate your willingness and a random reach out on Instagram that you'd say yes.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for thinking of me. It means a lot.
Thanks for watching today's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. We're going to have weekly episodes every Monday night at 7 p.m. Central Time. We'll be releasing a new episode. If you like the video, hit subscribe. Feel free to comment if you have something to say. We'd love to hear from you. If you have a story of hope that you think would be worth sharing, let us know. Our email is in our About section on our YouTube channel. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, and so I think it's so much about the beauty and the pain and holding those things like with an open hand all of the time and honoring what is really, really painful and being honest about that.